My fiancé left because I couldn't walk. I thought that was the end, until a Mafia boss walked into my hospital room and said the 6 words that would rewrite my life forever. I didn't know it yet, but the man I should have feared was about to become my salvation. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world you're tuning in from. We love seeing how far these stories of hope and second chances travel. Hit that subscribe button and like this video. Your support helps us in creating more amazing stories, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's jump right into the story. The crying wouldn't stop. I couldn't make it stop. I sat in that sterile hospital room in the Bronx, my wheelchair pressed against the bed rail, my hands covering my face as sobs tore through my chest like something breaking open. It was late, past midnight on October 12th, 2023, and the hallway outside was quiet except for the distant beep of monitors and the squeak of nurses' shoes on linoleum. I was 7 months pregnant and completely alone. Mark had walked out 20 minutes ago. Just walked out. Said he couldn't do it anymore, couldn't be with someone who'd never walk again, couldn't handle watching me struggle. He said he wasn't strong enough. Then he left me here, in this dim room that smelled like antiseptic and failure, with nowhere to go and no one to call. I didn't hear the footsteps in the hallway. Didn't notice someone had stopped outside my door until I felt it. That strange awareness that you're being watched. I looked up. A man stood in the doorway. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black leather jacket that was still damp from rain. Tattoos crawled up his neck, disappearing beneath his collar. His dark eyes were fixed on me, not with pity or disgust, but with something I couldn't name. Something intense. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. I felt my face flush with embarrassment. Here I was, crying like a child, pregnant and broken, in front of a complete stranger who looked like he'd walked straight out of a crime movie. "Sorry," I said, my voice hoarse and cracked. I didn't know anyone was out there. He took a step inside. His movements were deliberate, controlled, like a man used to entering rooms carefully. "You all right?" The question would have been funny if I had any laughter left in me. Did I look all right? A bitter sound escaped my throat. All right? I gestured at myself, the wheelchair, my swollen belly, the empty room, the hospital bracelet cutting into my wrist. My baby's father just walked out that door 20 minutes ago. Told me he can't do this anymore. Can't be with someone who'll never walk again. So no, I'm not all right. I watched his jaw tighten, saw something dark flash across his face. He looked me in the eyes. I continued, the words tumbling out now, unstoppable, and said he tried. He really, really tried to be okay with it. But watching me like this, pregnant, paralyzed, needing help with everything, he said it's too much. That he's not strong enough. I slapped the arm of my wheelchair. The sound was sharp in the quiet room. So he left. Just walked out. Left me here with nowhere to go and no one to call. The stranger stood there, silent, his hands loose at his sides. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers curled slightly, like he was restraining something dangerous. "I'm sorry," he said finally. His voice was low, rough, but genuine. I looked at him, really looked at him. The tattoos, the scars on his knuckles, the darkness that clung to him like cologne. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said quietly. "I know you're sitting here crying over someone who doesn't deserve your tears." Something about the way he said it, so matter-of-fact, so certain, made fresh tears spill down my face. 8 months ago, I was fine, I heard myself say. I was a nurse at Presbyterian. I loved my job, loved helping people. Then there was an accident. Drunk driver ran a red light at 2 a.m. while I was driving home from a night shift. The impact crushed my spine. I stared at my hands, at the engagement ring still on my finger. The surgery saved my life, but I couldn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. I'm paralyzed from the waist down. I'll never walk again. The stranger's expression didn't change. No flinching, no uncomfortable shifting. He just listened. "Mark, my fiancé, he said he'd stay. He visited me during rehab. He held my hand through physical therapy. He proposed again in the hospital, said we'd get through it together. I believed him. God, I believed him so completely. My voice broke. But tonight, he said he wants a normal life. A normal family. And I can't give him that. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. So here I am. Pregnant, paralyzed, and completely alone. The silence that followed felt heavy, suffocating. I waited for him to make an excuse and leave, like everyone else eventually did. Instead, he moved closer. He pulled something from inside his jacket, a black card with a phone number embossed in silver. He held it out to me. "You call this number if you need anything," he said. "Bills, doctors, problems that need handling. Anything." I stared at the card, not taking it. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me. You don't even know my name." "Linda," he said. My eyes snapped to his face. "How did you?" He nodded toward the whiteboard on the wall behind me, where my name was written in dry erase marker. "Linda Chin, room 412. "Linda," he repeated, and something about the way he said it made my name sound different. "Protected. You got family you can call?" I shook my head. "My parents died when I was in college. Car accident. I don't have siblings." Mark was. The words caught in my throat. He was supposed to be my family. The stranger's expression darkened. He pressed the card into my hand, closing my fingers around it. "You call this number if you need anything," he said again. "I mean it. Why?" The question came out as a whisper. "Why would you help me?" He met my eyes, and for the first time, I saw past the intimidating exterior to something raw underneath. "Because someone should have stayed," he said simply. "And since he didn't, I will." Then he turned and walked toward the door. "Wait," I called out. "What's your name?" He paused in the doorway, glanced back over his shoulder. "Ralph," he said. "Ralph Cox." Then he was gone, his footsteps fading down the hallway, leaving me alone in that hospital room with a black card in my trembling hand and a question burning in my chest. Who was Ralph Cox? And why did it feel like everything just changed? I stared at that card for hours after he left, turning it over in my hands like it might reveal its secrets. Just a phone number. No name, no address, nothing else. I told myself I wouldn't call it, that I didn't need help from a dangerous-looking stranger who'd appeared out of nowhere. But I kept the card, tucked it into the pocket of my hospital gown, right over my heart. I didn't know it then, but that card, that moment, would become the thread that pulled me out of the darkness and into a life I never could have imagined. 3 days passed before I saw him again. 3 days of nurses asking questions I couldn't answer, of social workers with clipboards and concerned expressions, of lying awake at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling while my baby kicked against my ribs. 3 days of that black card burning a hole in my hospital gown pocket. I'd moved it to the drawer of my bedside table on day 2. Told myself I was throwing it away, but I couldn't. Something about it felt like a lifeline I wasn't ready to cut. It was late afternoon on the 4th day when he walked back into my room. No knock. No warning. Just the door opening and Ralph Cox filling the doorway like he owned the space. He was dressed differently this time. Dark jeans, a black Henley that showed the tattoos on his forearms, a silver chain catching the light at his throat. He looked less like he'd stepped out of the rain and more like he'd stepped out of a shadow. "You," I said, my heart jumping into my throat. "Me." He closed the door behind him with a soft click. "How you doing, Linda?" I should have been scared. Should have pressed the call button for the nurse. Instead, I found myself straightening in my wheelchair, pushing my hair behind my ears like I cared what I looked like. "Why are you here?" I asked. He pulled the visitor's chair closer to my wheelchair and sat down, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. Up close, I could see his eyes weren't just dark. They were calculating, like he was reading every micro-expression on my face. "Checking on you," he said simply. "You don't know me." "I know enough." He tilted his head. "You used that number yet?" I shook my head. "I don't need." "Everyone needs something, Linda." His voice was matter-of-fact, not unkind. "Question is whether you're too proud to ask for it." Something about his directness cracked through my defenses. I was tired of pretending. Tired of being strong. "Fine," I said, meeting his eyes. "You want to know?" I'm being discharged tomorrow, and I have nowhere to go. The apartment Mark and I shared? His name's on the lease. My nursing salary covered groceries, not rent. I've been calling shelters all day, but none of them are wheelchair accessible, and the ones that are don't take pregnant women this far along. I gestured at my belly, fighting back tears. So there's your answer. I'm doing terribly. Ralph didn't flinch. Didn't offer empty comfort or tell me everything would be okay. He just nodded, like I'd given him information he needed to solve a problem. What about the accident? He asked. Insurance? Settlement. Lawyer says it'll be months before anything comes through. Maybe a year. The drunk driver who hit me didn't have coverage, so we're suing him personally, but he's got nothing. I laughed bitterly. Turns out getting paralyzed by someone broke doesn't pay well. And the fiancé? He paying child support. He says the baby isn't his responsibility, since we never got married. My voice hardened. His lawyer already sent papers. He's willing to sign away all parental rights if I don't come after him for money. Ralph's jaw tightened, and I saw his hands curl into fists before he deliberately relaxed them. That's what I thought, he said quietly. We sat in silence for a moment. I watched him, trying to figure out what he wanted, why he kept coming back. He didn't look at me with pity, it was something else. Something that felt like assessment, like he was cataloging my wounds the way a soldier might survey a battlefield. You want to know why I was here the other night? He asked suddenly. I nodded. One of my guys got shot. Took 3 bullets during a collection that went sideways in Hunts Point. I came to make sure the doctors understood he needed to survive. He met my eyes. My business is blood and loyalty, Linda. I run things people don't talk about in polite company. You're telling me you're a criminal? I said flatly. I'm telling you I'm not a good man.
His voice was steady.
But I keep my word. And I pay my debts. You don't owe me anything. Maybe not. He stood, pulled out another card. This one with an address written on the back in sharp, neat handwriting. But I'm offering anyway. This is a property I own in Riverdale. 3-bedroom, 1st floor, wheelchair accessible. It's sitting empty. You can stay there. No rent. Utilities covered. I stared at the card like it might bite me. I can't accept that. Why not? Because I don't know you. Because this feels like... I struggled for words. Like I'd owe you something. Ralph crouched down so we were eye level. His gaze was intense but not threatening. You don't owe me anything, Linda.
Not now.
Not ever.
This isn't about debt.
This is about the fact that you're 7 months pregnant with nowhere to go, and I have the means to fix that. He pressed the card into my hand. What you do with it is your choice. He stood and headed for the door. Ralph, I called. He turned. Why are you doing this? For a moment, something vulnerable flickered across his face. I had a sister, he said quietly. Car accident left her paralyzed when she was 16. She didn't make it past 18, not because of the injuries, but because everyone in her life made her feel like she wasn't worth staying for.
His jaw tightened.
I won't watch that happen again. Not if I can stop it. Then he was gone. I sat there in the fading afternoon light, holding 2 cards now, a phone number and an address. Both felt like dangerous promises. That night, I dreamed of Mark, of his face when he told me he was leaving, the relief in his eyes when he walked out. I dreamed of being alone, of falling, of my baby crying in a shelter I couldn't reach. But when I woke up in the darkness, heart pounding, it wasn't Mark's voice I remembered. It was Ralph's. I won't watch that happen again. Not if I can stop it. I reached into the drawer and pulled out both cards. And for the first time in months, I felt something besides despair. I felt hope. The snowstorm hit New York on a Tuesday night, exactly 1 week after I'd moved into Ralph's Riverdale apartment. I'd tried to refuse it. Spent 2 days in that hospital room staring at the address card, telling myself I couldn't accept this kind of help from a stranger who admitted he wasn't a good man. But when the social worker came with a list of shelters, all full, all inaccessible, I'd swallowed my pride and called the number on the back of the card. Ralph had answered on the first ring. Linda. The apartment, I'd said. Is the offer still open? I'll have keys waiting at the front desk in an hour. He'd been true to his word. The apartment was exactly as he described. First floor, wide doorways, grab bars in the bathroom, a kitchen with lowered counters. It was more than I deserved. More than I knew what to do with. But I'd taken it. Because my baby needed a roof over her head, and pride didn't keep you warm at night. I hadn't called Ralph since. Hadn't used his number. I was determined to prove I could handle this alone, that I wasn't some charity case who needed rescuing. Then the storm came. It started as light flurries around 6 p.m., but by 9 o'clock, the wind was howling against the windows and snow was coming down in thick, blinding sheets. The power flickered twice before dying completely, plunging the apartment into darkness. That's when the pain started. It came in waves, sharp, electric nerve pain shooting down my legs, the phantom agony of limbs that no longer worked. My doctor had warned me about this, said the damaged nerves sometimes misfired, sending pain signals my brain couldn't process. He'd prescribed medication, but I'd run out 3 days ago, and the pharmacy had said my insurance needed prior authorization. I'd been planning to deal with it in the morning. But now, alone in the dark with pain tearing through me, morning felt impossibly far away. Then the contractions started. Not the real thing, I knew that. Braxton Hicks, my OB, had called them practice contractions. But they were strong enough to steal my breath, to make my whole belly tighten like a fist, and combined with the nerve pain, I couldn't think, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but grip the arms of my wheelchair and try not to scream. I fumbled for my phone in the darkness, tried calling the nurse hotline my insurance provided. No answer. Just a recorded message about high call volumes. I tried again. And again. Nothing. Fear clawed at my chest. I was alone. The storm was getting worse. And something was wrong. I could feel it, that primal instinct that told me I needed help now. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone. But I managed to pull up my contacts, scrolling to the number I'd saved but never called. Ralph Cox. I stared at it, pride and desperation warring in my chest. It was almost midnight. The city was buried in snow. He probably wouldn't even answer. But my baby kicked hard against my ribs, and I pressed dial. He answered on the first ring. Linda. His voice was alert, sharp. No trace of sleep. What's wrong? My voice broke as another contraction hit. I can't, the pain. Where are you? The question was immediate, commanding. The apartment. Riverdale. But Ralph, there's a storm. I know. Stay on the phone with me. I heard movement, door slamming, an engine starting. The contractions, I gasped. They won't stop. And my legs, the nerve pain, I can't reach my medication. How far apart are the contractions? I don't. Maybe 10 minutes? They're not regular. Okay. That's okay. You're okay. His voice was steady, an anchor in the chaos. I'm 20 minutes out. Can you get to somewhere warm? The power's out. I heard him curse under his breath. Find blankets. I'm coming. Ralph, you can't drive in this. 20 minutes, Linda. I'm already on the road. The line went dead. I sat there in the darkness, my whole body shaking, and realized I was crying. Not from pain, from relief. Because for the first time since Mark had walked out, someone was coming. Someone had heard me say I need help and responded with I'm on my way. It felt like a miracle. 37 minutes later, I counted everyone. There was pounding on my door. Linda, open up. I wheeled to the door as fast as I could, fumbled with the locks. When I pulled it open, Ralph stood there covered in snow, his jacket soaked through, his face red from cold. He was carrying grocery bags in one hand and a duffel bag in the other. He stepped inside, kicked the door shut, and dropped everything on the floor. Then he knelt in front of my wheelchair, his hands coming up to cup my face. You're freezing, he said, his thumbs brushing away my tears. So are you, I whispered. He pulled off his wet jacket and wrapped it around my shoulders, still warm from his body heat. Then he grabbed the blankets from his duffel and layered them over my lap, my shoulders, tucking them around me like I was something precious. The contractions? He asked. slowing down. I think they were just stress, maybe. He nodded, already moving. He found candles in my kitchen, lit them, pulled out a thermos from one of the bags, and poured something hot into a mug. Tea, fragrant and sweet. Drink, he ordered gently, pressing it into my hands.
I did.
The warmth spread through me like light. Ralph worked quietly, efficiently. He found my medication in the bathroom, brought me water, and the painkillers I'd been rationing. He adjusted my wheelchair's position, angled it away from the drafty window. When my hands wouldn't stop shaking from adrenaline and cold, he took them between his own, rough, scarred, impossibly warm, and held them until the trembling stopped. Better? He asked. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. He'd driven through a blizzard at midnight because I'd called. This man, this dangerous man who dealt in blood and loyalty, had dropped everything and come for me. You should try to sleep, Ralph said, pulling a chair close to my wheelchair. I'll stay. Make sure you're okay. You don't have to. I know. As exhaustion finally dragged me under, wrapped in blankets that smelled like smoke and winter, I whispered, You didn't have to come. In the candlelit darkness, I felt him lean closer. Yeah, he murmured, his voice soft as a promise. I did. And for the first time in 8 months, I fell asleep feeling safe. I woke to the smell of coffee and eggs. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. Then I heard the quiet clink of dishes in the kitchen, the low hum of someone moving carefully, trying not to wake me.
Ralph.
Daylight filtered through the windows, pale and clean. The storm had passed, leaving the world wrapped in white silence. I was still in my wheelchair, still wrapped in the blankets Ralph had tucked around me, but someone had tilted the chair back slightly so my neck wouldn't ache. I wheeled toward the kitchen and stopped in the doorway. Ralph stood at the stove, his back to me, flipping eggs in a pan. He'd changed out of his wet clothes, must have had spares in that duffel, and was wearing a plain black t-shirt that showed the full scope of the tattoos covering his arms. A snake coiled around his left bicep. Words in script I couldn't read from this distance wrapped around his right forearm. He turned, spatula in hand, and saw me watching. You're up, he said. How's the pain? Better. It was true. The medication had worked, and the contractions had stopped completely. My body felt heavy, exhausted, but no longer screaming. You stayed all night. Someone had to make sure you didn't go into labor during a blackout. He plated the eggs, added toast, and carried it to the small dining table. You need to eat. I wanted to argue, to tell him he'd done enough, but my stomach betrayed me with a loud growl. Ralph's mouth twitched, almost a smile. We ate in comfortable silence. The eggs were simple, perfectly cooked. When had someone last cooked for me? Mark had always ordered takeout, said he didn't have the patience for the kitchen. Thank you, I said finally. For last night. For all of this. Ralph set down his fork and looked at me, really looked at me. There was something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Something raw. I had a sister, he said quietly. I went still. Her name was Sophia. She was 16 when it happened. Drunk driver T-boned her car on the way home from a friend's house. Broken spine. Just like you. His jaw tightened. Doctors said she'd never walk again. Ralph, you don't have to. She was the best of us, he continued, his voice rough. Smart. Funny. Wanted to be a teacher. But after the accident, everything changed. Not because of the wheelchair, she could have handled that. It was everyone else. The way people looked at her. Talked to her like she was fragile. Like she'd broken into something less than human. His hands curled into fists on the table. Our parents tried, but they didn't know how to help. They treated her like glass. Her friends stopped coming around. The boy she was dating, he laughed bitterly. He ghosted her 3 weeks after the accident. Didn't even have the guts to break up with her. Just disappeared. My chest ached. I knew that story. I was living that story. She got quiet, Ralph said. Stopped fighting.
Stop trying.
And 2 years later, she took a bottle of pills and didn't wake up. God, Ralph. Tears burned my eyes. I'm so sorry. He shook his head. I was 19. Already running with the wrong crowd, making money the wrong way. I told myself I was too busy to notice she was drowning. Truth is, I was a coward. I didn't know how to help her, so I didn't try. He looked up, and his eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. But you, he said. You remind me of her. Except you're still fighting. You're alone, pregnant, dealing with more than anyone should have to carry, and you're still here. Still pushing forward. That's strength, Linda. Real strength. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. So, when you called last night, Ralph continued, there was no question. I wasn't going to let you face that alone. Not the way Sophia did. We sat there in the morning light, two broken people who'd found each other in the wreckage. I won't let you down, he said. Whatever you need, doctor's appointments, groceries, someone to intimidate insurance companies, I'm here. You understand. I nodded, wiping at my eyes. Why does it feel like you're saving my life? Because maybe you're saving mine too. After that morning, everything changed. Ralph didn't just check on me. He became a constant presence. When I had an OB appointment 3 days later, he drove me. When the receptionist tried to make me wait 2 hours past my scheduled time, Ralph leaned against the desk with that dangerous smile and said, She's 7 months pregnant and in a wheelchair. You're going to see her now. We were taken back in 5 minutes. When my insurance denied coverage for physical therapy, Ralph made 3 phone calls. I didn't ask what he said or who he called. I just knew that by the next day, I had approval for twice-weekly sessions. When the pharmacy tried to charge me $400 for medication, Ralph walked in with me, had a quiet conversation with the pharmacist, and suddenly my copay was $20. What did you say to him? I asked as we left. Just reminded him about patient assistance programs. Ralph's expression was innocent. Too innocent. I didn't push it. The thing was, I'd started seeing him differently. Not as the dangerous criminal who'd walked into my hospital room, but as something else. Something complicated. Yes, he was rough around the edges. Yes, he carried violence like a second skin. But with me, he was careful, gentle, protective. He was becoming my safety net. And I was terrified of what that meant. 2 weeks after the storm, Ralph walked me to my door after a doctor's appointment. The baby was healthy, growing strong. The doctor had smiled when she said it, and for the first time, I'd felt something like joy. You good for the night? Ralph asked, his hand on the doorframe.
Yeah.
I'm good. He nodded, started to turn away. Ralph.
He looked back.
Thank you, I said. For everything. For seeing me when no one else would. Something shifted in his expression, softer, vulnerable. Get some rest, Linda. Then he was gone, his footsteps fading down the hall. I locked the door and wheeled to the window, watching him walk to his car through the parking lot. The Bronx stretched out beyond, loud and chaotic and dangerous. But inside this apartment, I felt safe. Safer than I'd felt in months. Maybe years. And it was all because of him. Mark showed up on a Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks after Ralph had become part of my life. I was in the living room doing the stretches my physical therapist had prescribed when I heard the pounding on the door. Aggressive. Insistent. The kind of knocking that meant trouble. My heart seized. Linda. Open the door. I know you're in there. Mark's voice. I'd recognize it anywhere. The voice that had once whispered promises, now sharp with anger. I wheeled to the door, my hands shaking. What do you want? Open the damn door. Against my better judgment, I unlocked it. The chain was still on, giving me a few inches of space to see him through the crack. He looked terrible. Unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, his clothes wrinkled like he'd been wearing them for days. But his eyes, those were what scared me. They were wild, desperate. We need to talk, he said. We have nothing to talk about. Yes, we do. He pushed against the door, testing the chain. Let me in, Linda.
No.
I said let me in. He slammed his palm against the door, and I flinched back. Go away, Mark. Or I'm calling the police. He laughed, bitter, hollow.
Call them.
But first, you're going to listen to what I have to say. That accident settlement? The one your lawyer's been negotiating? I know it's about to come through. $300,000. My blood went cold. How did he know that? My lawyer had just called me yesterday with the news. That money has nothing to do with you, I said. The hell it doesn't. We were engaged when you got hit. We were living together. I took care of you after the accident. You left me. My voice cracked. You walked out when I was 7 months pregnant. And I'm back now. His voice turned calculating, cold. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign over half that settlement to me. Call it compensation for emotional damages. For the life I gave up trying to take care of you. I stared at him through the crack in the door, unable to believe what I was hearing. And if I don't, then I call social services. He smiled, and it was cruel. Tell them you're an unfit mother. Paralyzed, living alone, no support system. How are you going to take care of a baby when you can't even walk? They'll take that kid the moment it's born. Terror shot through me like ice water. You wouldn't. Try me. You've got 48 hours to think about it. He pushed off from the doorframe. I'll be back Saturday morning with the papers. Have them signed, Linda, or I make your life a living hell. Then he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. I locked the door with shaking hands and sat there, my whole body trembling.
He was bluffing.
He had to be bluffing. But what if he wasn't? What if they really could take my baby, because I was in a wheelchair? I spent the rest of the afternoon frozen, paralyzed by more than just my injury. By the time the sun set, I'd convinced myself Mark was right. I was unfit. How could I care for a newborn when I couldn't even stand? My phone rang at 8 o'clock. Ralph's name lit up the screen. I almost didn't answer, but my hand moved on its own. Hey, I said, trying to sound normal. Silence. Then, what's wrong? Nothing. I'm fine. Linda. His voice dropped, dangerous and soft. Don't lie to me. What happened? The tears came then, hot and fast. It's nothing. I can handle it. Who scared you? The question was so direct, so certain, that I couldn't hide anymore. Mark came by, I whispered. My ex. He wants money from my settlement. Said if I don't give it to him, he'll call social services. Tell them I'm unfit to be a mother because of the wheelchair. The silence on the other end was terrifying. Not empty, full. Like a storm building. Where does he live? Ralph's voice was perfectly calm. Ralph, no. Address, Linda. I don't want you to do anything. I'm not going to do anything. But the way he said it made my skin prickle. I just want to talk to him. Man to man. Help him understand why threatening you is a bad idea. I gave him Mark's address.
I don't know why.
Maybe because I was desperate. Maybe because part of me wanted Mark to feel the fear he'd made me feel. Get some rest, Ralph said. This is handled. Ralph. Trust me, Linda. The line went dead.
I didn't sleep that night.
I kept checking my phone, waiting for news, for sirens, for something. But there was nothing. Just silence. The next morning, I was making coffee when my phone buzzed with a news alert. Vehicle found abandoned on Hutchinson River Parkway. Owner's belongings inside. Police seeking information. The attached photo showed Mark's silver Honda. My hand went numb. 20 minutes later, there was a knock on my door. Soft this time. Controlled. I knew who it was before I opened it. Ralph stood there in the morning light, dressed in a fresh black jacket, his expression calm. Peaceful almost. Morning, he said. Mark's car, I started, was found empty on the parkway. Looks like he packed up and left town in a hurry. Weird how that happens sometimes. Ralph's eyes met mine. Problems handled. I should have been horrified. Should have demanded to know what he'd done. But all I felt was relief. Deep, bone-shaking relief. Did you? Is he? He's alive, Ralph said quietly. Just somewhere far away, thinking very carefully about his life choices. He won't be back. And he won't be calling anyone about your baby. We stood there in the doorway, the weight of what he'd done hanging between us.
How?
I whispered. You don't want to know.
He was right.
I didn't. Thank you, I said, my voice breaking. Ralph stepped closer, his hand coming up to rest against the doorframe, his body blocking out the world behind him. No one threatens you, he said softly. Not him. Not anyone. You understand me? I nodded, unable to speak. You're mine to protect now, Linda. That's how this works. He said it like a vow, like a promise written in blood. And God help me, I believed him. After he left, I sat by the window, watching the city move below. Somewhere out there, Mark was running. Somewhere out there, Ralph had drawn a line in the sand that no one would dare cross. I should have been afraid of him. Instead, I felt safer than I'd ever felt in my life. Because the most dangerous man I'd ever met had decided I was worth protecting. And in his world, that meant something. Ralph started visiting more often after that. Not every day. He had business, things he never talked about but that I could read in the tension of his shoulders, the late-night phone calls he took in hushed tones outside my apartment. But 3, sometimes 4 times a week, he'd show up with groceries or to drive me to appointments or sometimes just to sit in my living room and exist in the same space. It became a rhythm, a routine. Something I started looking forward to in a way that scared me. 6 weeks before my due date, he knocked on my door at noon carrying bags from the hardware store. "What's all that?" I asked as he walked past me into the apartment. "Safety bars for the shower. Better locks for the windows. Motion sensor lights for the hallway." He set everything down in the kitchen. "This building's security is garbage. Ralph, you don't have to." "I know." He pulled out a drill, already moving toward the bathroom. "I'm doing it anyway." I watched him work for the next 2 hours. Watched the careful way he measured twice before drilling, the concentration on his face as he installed each bar at the exact height I'd need. This man, this dangerous man who made people disappear, was on his knees in my bathroom, making sure I wouldn't fall. "Why do you do this?" I asked from the doorway. He glanced up. "Do what?" "All of this. The apartment, the doctors, the protection. You've already done more for me than anyone ever has. Why do you keep coming back?" Ralph set down the drill and stood, wiping his hands on his jeans. He looked at me for a long moment, something unreadable in his dark eyes. "You ever feel like you're walking through life waiting for it to hit you?" he asked. "Like you're just going through motions, doing what you're supposed to do, but none of it means anything?" I nodded slowly. "That's been my life for 10 years, he said. "Since Sophia died. I built an empire. Made more money than I could spend, earned respect, or fear, depending how you look at it. But none of it felt real. None of it felt like it mattered." He took a step closer. "And then I heard you crying in that hospital room. And for the first time in a decade, something cut through the noise. Something felt important. My heart was pounding. I'm just a woman you barely know."
No.
His voice was soft but firm. "You're the first thing in 10 years that's made me feel human." The words hung between us like a confession. "I don't sleep well," Ralph continued, his eyes never leaving mine. "Never have. Men like me don't deserve peace. We carry too much blood, too many ghosts. But the nights I know you're safe here, in this apartment, the nights I know you're not alone, those nights I sleep." I couldn't breathe. "So yeah, I keep coming back. Because helping you helps me. Because for the first time since I lost my sister, I'm doing something that matters. Something good." "Ralph, you don't have to say anything," he said quickly. "I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to understand why." But I did have something to say. I'd been holding it back for weeks, terrified of what it meant, terrified of the way my heart jumped every time I heard his knock on the door. "The other night," I said softly, "I was reading about infant care, about how to bathe a baby, how to change diapers from a wheelchair, how to do everything I'll need to do alone. And I started crying because I was so scared. Scared I wouldn't be enough. That I'd fail before I even started." Ralph's expression softened. "And then I thought about you," I continued. "About the way you show up when you say you will. The way you listen without judgment. The way you make me feel like I'm not just a burden someone has to carry." And I realized something. "What?" "Maybe peace isn't something you deserve," I said, echoing words I'd once spoken to him. "Maybe it's something you give yourself. Maybe it's something we give each other." For the first time since I'd met him, Ralph smiled. Really smiled. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less haunted. "You're dangerous, Linda Chun," he said.
Why?
"Because you make me want things I stopped believing in a long time ago." We stood there in my tiny bathroom, the afternoon light slanting through the window, and something shifted. Something that couldn't be taken back. That night, after Ralph had finished installing the safety equipment and made sure I had everything I needed, he lingered at the door. "I should go," he said, but he didn't move. "You could stay," I heard myself say. "For dinner. I can't cook much, but I make a mean grilled cheese." His smile returned. "Yeah."
Yeah.
So he stayed. We ate grilled cheese and tomato soup at my small table, and we talked about everything except his work and my fears. We talked about movies, about books, about the way the city sounded at night. We talked about his mother, who died when he was 12. About my parents, gone too soon in a crash that had left me alone years before the accident that took my legs. We talked like two people getting to know each other. Not a criminal and his charity case. Just two broken people finding something whole in the wreckage. When he finally left, close to midnight, he paused in the doorway. "Linda?" "Yeah. I'm glad you called me that night. During the storm." "Me too." After he left, I sat by the window with my hand on my belly, feeling my baby move beneath my palm. The Bronx sprawled out below, all lights and chaos and endless noise. But up here, in this apartment Ralph had given me, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. I felt like I was going to be okay. Not because someone had saved me, but because someone had seen me, really seen me, and decided I was worth staying for. And maybe that was its own kind of miracle. It happened at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, for weeks before my due date. I woke to wetness and pain, sharp, immediate, terrifying. For a moment, I thought I'd lost control of my bladder, something that happens sometimes with my injury. But then the contraction hit, and I knew. This was real. The baby was coming. "No, no, no," I whispered, fumbling for my phone in the darkness. "It's too early. Please, not yet." But my body didn't care about timelines. Another contraction seized me, stronger than the Braxton Hicks I'd experienced before. This was different. This was urgent. I called 911 with shaking hands, then immediately called Ralph. He answered before the first ring finished. "Linda? The baby," I gasped as another wave of pain crashed through me. "I'm in labor. Ambulance is coming. I'm on my way. Don't hang up. Stay with me." His voice was the only thing keeping me tethered as I waited, as the contractions came faster, as fear threatened to swallow me whole. I'd read all the books, taken the online classes, but nothing prepared you for this. Nothing prepared you for your body taking over, for the primal terror of bringing life into the world alone. The ambulance arrived in 8 minutes. Ralph arrived in 12. I was already being loaded into the back when I heard his voice cutting through the night. "Linda." I turned my head, saw him running across the parking lot, his car abandoned with the door still open, hazard lights flashing. "I'm here," he said, climbing into the ambulance before anyone could stop him. "I've got you." The EMT started to protest. "Sir, family only." "I'm family." Ralph's tone left no room for argument. The EMT looked at me. I nodded frantically, reaching for Ralph's hand. "He stays." The hospital was chaos. Bright lights, urgent voices, nurses asking questions I could barely answer through the pain. They rushed me to labor and delivery, transferred me to the bed, started monitors and IVs. "Her spine injury," a nurse was saying. "We need to be careful with positioning." "I know," I gasped. "I can't feel below my waist. You have to watch for her." Another contraction cut off my words, and I screamed. Ralph's hand found mine, his grip solid and grounding. "I'm here," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." A doctor appeared, young and efficient. "Mrs. Chun, I'm Dr. Patel. We're going to take care of you. The baby's heart rate is good, but you're progressing fast. We need to prep you for delivery. It's too early. 36 weeks is early, but viable. Your baby is going to be fine." But I wasn't fine. I was terrified. Paralyzed from the waist down, I couldn't feel the contractions the way other women could. Couldn't tell when to push. Couldn't trust my body. to do what it needed to do. The monitors would have to tell me. The doctors would have to guide me. I can't do this, I sobbed, gripping Ralph's hand like a lifeline. I can't. Yes, you can. Ralph leaned close, his face inches from mine. Linda, look at me. I did. His dark eyes were intense, unwavering. You've survived worse than this. You survived an accident that should have killed you. You survived being abandoned when you needed someone most. You've survived every single day of the last 8 months. You can survive this. I'm scared. I know. But you're not alone. I'm right here. I'm not leaving. Labor lasted 6 hours. 6 hours of pain and fear and exhaustion. 6 hours of Ralph holding my hand, whispering encouragement, refusing to leave even when nurses suggested he take a break. Breathe, Linda. Just breathe. You're doing so good. So damn good. One more push. You've got this. His voice became my anchor, the only thing keeping me from drowning. And then, at 8:47 a.m., my son was born. The doctor held him up, small and red and screaming, and my heart stopped. He was perfect. Impossibly, miraculously perfect. It's a boy, the doctor said, smiling. A healthy baby boy. They placed him on my chest, warm and squirming, and I couldn't breathe.
Couldn't think.
Could only stare at this tiny human I'd made, this life that had somehow survived everything. Hi, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Hi, baby. I'm your mom. He quieted at my voice, his eyes, dark and unfocused, searching for mine. And then I looked at Ralph. He was crying. Silent tears tracked down his face, and he made no move to wipe them away. He just stood there, staring at my son with something like wonder, like reverence, like he was witnessing something holy. Ralph, I whispered. He reached out with a trembling hand and gently touched my son's tiny fist. The baby's fingers curled around Ralph's thumb, holding on. And Ralph broke. A sob escaped him, raw and broken. He pressed his free hand over his mouth, but the tears kept coming. I'd never seen him like this. Vulnerable. Unguarded.
Human.
I'm sorry, he choked out. It's okay, I said softly. It's okay. Later, after they'd cleaned the baby and checked his vitals, after the nurses had helped me settle into a recovery room, Ralph sat beside my bed holding my son. He looked down at the sleeping infant with an expression I couldn't name. Protective.
Awed.
Terrified. Why are you here, Ralph? I whispered. He looked up, and his eyes were still red-rimmed. What? You could have left after you drove me here. Could have waited in the lobby. But you stayed. Through all of it. Why? Ralph was quiet for a long moment, his gaze dropping back to the baby in his arms. Because you're the only thing that's made me feel human in years, he said softly. You, and now him. You make me believe I could be something other than what I've been. Someone better. Fresh tears spilled down my cheeks.
You already are, I said.
You already are. Ralph leaned forward and carefully placed my son back in my arms. Then he did something I never expected. He pressed a kiss to my forehead, gentle and reverent. What are you going to name him? He asked. I looked down at my baby, at his perfect face, at the future I'd been so terrified I couldn't give him. Gabriel, I said. It means God is my strength. Ralph's smile was soft, genuine. It's perfect. And sitting there in that hospital room, holding my son while Ralph watched over us both, I realized something. I'd been so afraid of doing this alone. But I wasn't alone. Not anymore. Ralph had walked into my pain and hadn't flinched. He'd stayed when everyone else had run. He'd held my hand through the darkest night and helped me bring light into the world. And somewhere along the way, I'd fallen in love with him. The most dangerous man I'd ever met had become the safest place I'd ever known. And I wasn't letting go. A week after Gabriel was born, I was finally starting to feel like myself again. Not the self I'd been before the accident. That woman was gone. But a new version. Stronger, maybe. Or at least more certain of who I needed to be for my son. Ralph had been there every day. He'd shown up at the hospital with clothes for me, supplies for Gabriel, and a quiet steadiness that made the chaos of new motherhood feel manageable. When the nurses taught me how to breastfeed from my wheelchair, he'd sat in the corner and pretended to check his phone, giving me privacy, but staying close enough to help if I needed him. When we'd come home 3 days ago, he'd already installed a bassinet next to my bed, stocked the apartment with diapers and formula, and somehow acquired a state-of-the-art baby monitor that probably cost more than my first car.
You didn't have to do all this, I'd said.
I know. That was always his answer. I know.
But he did it anyway.
Now, on a quiet Thursday afternoon, I sat in my wheelchair near the window with Gabriel sleeping in my arms. He was perfect, 7 pounds, 2 ounces of pure miracle. Dark hair like mine, but his features were still forming, still deciding who he'd become. I heard Ralph's key in the lock. He'd given me his key, and I'd given him mine. It had felt significant at the time, like crossing some invisible threshold. The door opened, and he walked in carrying takeout bags and something else, a manila folder tucked under his arm. "Hey," he said, setting the food on the counter. "You eaten today?"
Twice.
"I'm okay." But he was already unpacking containers, soup from the deli I liked, fresh bread, fruit. Taking care of me had become second nature to him. "Ralph." "Yeah." He glanced over, and I saw it, the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands moved just a little too carefully. "What's wrong?" He went still. Then he picked up the manila folder and walked over to me, pulling the other chair close so we were facing each other. "I need to talk to you about something," he said. My heart seized. This was it. He was leaving. He'd done his duty, made sure I was okay, and now he was going to tell me he couldn't do this anymore. That playing house with a paralyzed woman and her baby wasn't what he signed up for. "Okay," I whispered, bracing myself. Ralph set the folder on his lap and stared at it for a long moment. When he looked up, I saw something I'd never seen before. He was nervous. Ralph Cox, the man who made grown men disappear, who walked into hospitals and demanded doctors listen, who'd faced down my ex-boyfriend with nothing but cold certainty. He was nervous. "I don't know what people like me are supposed to do," he said quietly. "I've spent my whole life taking things, breaking things, being something people fear. I don't know how to be normal, how to be good." "Ralph, what are you talking about?" He opened the folder and pulled out a stack of papers. Legal documents, from what I could see. Official seals and signatures. "But I know I want to do this right," he continued. "I know I want to protect you. Both of you. In every way that matters." He handed me the papers. I looked down, scanning the legal language, trying to make sense of it. And then I saw it. Petition for legal guardianship. Ralph Michael Cox, petitioner. Linda Marie Chun and Gabriel Chun, protected parties. My breath stopped. "What is this?" I whispered. "It's guardianship papers," Ralph said, his voice steady but his eyes uncertain. "If you sign them, I become Gabriel's legal guardian. Not his father. I know I don't have that right. But his protector. Someone with legal standing to make medical decisions if you can't, to ensure he's taken care of if something happens to you, to make sure no one, not Mark, not social services, not anyone, can touch him." Tears burned my eyes. "And there's something else." He pulled out another document. "A petition to change your legal name. Both of you." I stared at him, not understanding. "I'm offering you my last name," Ralph said quietly. "Not because I own you. Not because you need saving. But because names mean something in my world. They mean protection. They mean belonging. And you and that kid deserve a name no one will ever touch. A name that says you're under my protection, now and always." Ralph. Linda Chun becomes Linda Cox. Gabriel Chun becomes Gabriel Cox. And anyone who wants to hurt you has to go through me first. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. "Why?" I whispered. "Why would you do this?" He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes locked on mine. "Because I love you," he said simply. "I don't know when it happened. Maybe that first night in the hospital when I saw you crying alone. Maybe during the storm when you called me and trusted me to come. Maybe the moment I held Gabriel and realized I'd do anything, to keep you both safe. A sob broke from my throat. I'm not asking you to love me back, Ralph continued quickly. I'm not asking for anything except the chance to do this right. To give you the protection you deserve. To make sure that when people see you, they don't see a woman alone. They see a woman who belongs to someone who would burn the world down before letting anyone hurt her. I couldn't speak.
Couldn't breathe.
Could only stare at this man, this dangerous, complicated, impossibly gentle man who was offering me everything. You don't have to answer now, he said.
Take time.
Think about it. I know what I'm asking is. Yes. He stopped. What? Yes, I said again, tears streaming down my face. Yes to the guardianship. Yes to the name. Yes to all of it. Linda. I love you too, I whispered. I think I've loved you since the night you drove through a blizzard because I called. Since you sat with me in the dark and made me feel less alone. Since you held my hand through labor and cried when my son was born. Ralph's eyes were bright, his jaw tight. You're not asking me to do something crazy, I continued. You're asking me to accept what's already true, that you're my family. That you've been my family since the moment you decided I was worth saving. He reached out and cupped my face with both hands, his thumbs brushing away my tears. You and Gabriel are my whole world, he said, his voice breaking. I'll protect you with everything I have. I swear it. I know, I whispered. I know you will. And then he kissed me.
Soft.
Gentle. Like I was something precious. Like he'd been waiting his whole life to do this and wanted to savor every second. When he pulled back, Gabriel stirred in my arms, making a small sound. Ralph looked down at him, and his expression transformed, soft, awed, paternal. Can I hold him? He asked.
He's yours too now, I said.
Of course you can. Ralph lifted Gabriel from my arms with infinite care, cradling him against his chest. He looked down at the baby, and I saw tears slip down his face again. Hey, little man, he whispered. I'm going to take care of you. You and your mom. That's a promise. Gabriel yawned, completely unbothered by the fact that his entire world had just shifted. And sitting there in that apartment, watching Ralph hold my son while the afternoon light painted everything gold, I realized something. I'd thought my story ended the night Mark walked out. But it didn't end. It transformed. Because the man the world called dangerous had done the unthinkable. He'd loved me when I was unlovable. He'd stayed when everyone else left. And now he was giving us his name, his protection, his promise, his future. Ralph Cox had walked into my devastation and built me a home. And I was never letting go. 6 months later, everything had changed. It was a Sunday in late April, one of those perfect spring days when New York remembers it can be beautiful. The sun was warm but not harsh. The breeze off the Hudson River carried the smell of salt and possibility, and the Riverside Park boardwalk was filled with families, couples, people walking dogs, and living lives that looked nothing like mine used to. But now, my life looked different too. I wheeled myself down the boardwalk with Gabriel in my lap, his chubby 6-month-old hands reaching for everything. The sun, the birds, my hair. He was laughing, that pure baby joy that made everyone around us smile. Ralph walked beside me, one hand resting on the back of my wheelchair, not pushing. I told him 100 times I could do it myself, but just there, a constant presence, a promise kept. We'd gotten the stares at first, still did, sometimes. The whispers. That's Ralph Cox. You know, the Ralph Cox. Is that his wife? In the wheelchair? I heard she was paralyzed. And that baby, is it his? What's a guy like that doing with someone like her? The rumors had spread through the neighborhood like wildfire after I'd legally changed my name. Linda Cox. It had weight, that name. It meant something in certain circles. It meant protection. It meant belonging. It meant no one touched us without answering to him. But more than that, it meant I wasn't alone anymore. Ralph had softened over these months. Not weak, he'd never be weak. But different. He still had his business, still took calls in the middle of the night that he'd step outside to handle. still carried that dangerous edge that made strangers keep their distance. But when he looked at Gabriel, when he looked at me, something in him shifted. The darkness was still there. It would always be there. Men like Ralph didn't erase their pasts. But love had reshaped him, the way water reshapes stone. Gradually, patiently, until what remained was something both hard and beautiful. "You tired?" Ralph asked, glancing down at me. "I'm good," I said, smiling up at him. "Gabriel's loving this." As if on cue, Gabriel squealed and clapped his hands, nearly smacking me in the face. Ralph laughed, a sound I'd heard more in the last 6 months than I'd thought possible. "He's got your energy," Ralph said. "And your stubborn streak." "That's fair." We stopped at a bench overlooking the water. Ralph sat down beside my wheelchair, and I carefully transferred Gabriel into his arms. Ralph held him up, making faces that sent Gabriel into fits of giggles. Watching them together never got old. This man, this feared, dangerous man, had become the most devoted father I'd ever seen, even though he had no legal obligation to be. But he'd chosen us. Every single day, he chose us. "You know what I was thinking about this morning?" I said, watching the sunlight play off the water. "What's that?" "That night in the hospital, when Mark left." Ralph's expression darkened slightly. "Linda." "No, let me finish." I reached over and took his free hand. I was thinking about how I felt like my life was over. Like everything I'd hoped for, everything I'd dreamed about, it was gone. I was paralyzed, pregnant, and alone. And I genuinely believed that was my ending. That I'd spend the rest of my life defined by what I'd lost. Ralph squeezed my hand. "And then you walked into that room." I continued, my voice soft. "You walked into my pain and didn't flinch. You didn't offer me pity or empty promises. You just stayed. When no one else would, you stayed." "Linda." "The world calls you dangerous," I said, meeting his eyes. "They whisper about your past, about the things you've done, the person you used to be. But you know what I call you?" "What?" "Home." Ralph's eyes glistened. He set Gabriel carefully in my lap and pulled me close, his forehead resting against mine. "You saved me," he whispered. "You and him. You gave me a reason to be something more than what I was." "We saved each other," I said.
And it was true.
He'd given me protection, a name, a family. But I'd given him something too, a reason to be gentle, to hope, to believe that his past didn't have to define his future. We sat there for a while, the three of us, watching boats drift past on the river. Families walked by, some curious, some cautious. But I didn't care what they thought anymore. Let them whisper. Let them wonder what a man like Ralph Cox was doing with a paralyzed woman and a baby who wasn't biologically his. The answer was simple. He was living. For the first time in 10 years, Ralph Cox was truly living. Gabriel started to fuss, and Ralph stood, lifting him from my lap. He held Gabriel up toward the sun, and my son laughed, his tiny hands reaching for the light. The late afternoon sun bathed them both in gold, this dangerous man and this innocent child, and something in my chest cracked open with pure, overwhelming joy. This was my family, not the one I'd planned for, not the one society expected, but the one we'd built from wreckage and hope and stubborn, unshakable love. Ralph looked over at me, Gabriel still giggling in his arms, and smiled. "Ready to head home, Mrs. Cox?" "Mrs. Cox." It still gave me chills. "Yeah," I said, smiling back. "Let's go home." They said I'd never find someone who could love me in a wheelchair. They said no man would want a paralyzed woman with another man's baby. They said I was broken, unlovable, too damaged to deserve happiness. They were wrong, because the most dangerous man in New York looked at me and saw strength instead of weakness. He saw a woman worth protecting, worth choosing, worth loving. He walked into my devastation when everyone else walked out. He held my hand through the darkest nights and never let go. He gave me his name, his protection, and his heart, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. The world called me the paralyzed woman who got rejected. But Ralph called me his wife. He called Gabriel his son. And he called our little family the only thing that ever made him feel like he deserved redemption. I used to think my story ended the night Mark walked away. But I was wrong. That wasn't my ending. It was my beginning. And every morning when I wake up in the apartment Ralph gave me, when I hear him in the kitchen making coffee and talking softly to Gabriel, when I see the way he looks at us like we're his entire world, I remember. I remember that the man who stayed was worth more than 1,000 who ran. That love isn't about finding someone when life is easy. It's about choosing someone when life gets hard.
And Ralph chose me.
Every single day, he chooses me. The pregnant woman was rejected for being paralyzed until a mafia boss did the unthinkable. He didn't just save me. He loved me. And that changed everything.